2, 4, 5. So after he explained what happens when a person does an Avera, what happens when a person does Teshuva, namely that the Avera causes that the chayas, the godly life flow, especially the hay of Hashem's name, should be drawn into Klipa and disconnected from its source, where it was before connected to the 3 letters of Yud and K and Vav. And the Teshuva is to return the hay. The hay should be reconnected to its original source, and that happens once I do Teshuva. So after you explain the damage of the Avera and what we can accomplish through Teshuva, now he's going to explain how a person does Teshuva. I think the rooms are mixed up.
What one is about?
Rabbi papers over there, yeah. Let me see it again. What is the true direct path to the lower level of Tshuva? In other words, apparently there could be different paths. And Alter Rebbe is saying this would be the deepest way to get there, the straightest way to get there. And that is Keitata, to return the lower hay of Hashem's name, mentioned before. In Beis Dvarim Derech Klal. So it involves 2 things in general, how to do this Tshuva. Page 246. The first thing is, we started this piece yesterday, to arouse supreme compassion in the source of mercy, on the kiss. Basically, this means that we work on ourselves to generate a feeling and to try to feel how pitiful it is, and the feeling of compassion for the neshama, that the neshama had such a descent. It fell down from a high roof. The high roof is Chaya Chayim Baruch Hu. It was before it was connected to Hashem, who was the source of all life, and it fell down the Bira Mikta to a deep pit. What is the deep pit? When we talk about high and low, in this context, high is more godly, and low is the opposite of godliness, klipa. So here the neshama comes from the highest place, but it goes down to the lowest place. In fact, once we explain that the neshama is not like everything else in creation. Everything else in creation comes from Shem Elokim, and the neshama comes from Shem Havaya. So what does that mean? That the neshama, everything comes from Hashem, but the neshama comes from a place within Hashem that's higher than the entire creation, even higher than the angels. So that's what it means. It's coming from a very high place, using the analogy of a tall building, and in the building itself, not the highest floor, but the roof of the building, where basically you can't get higher than that. And then when it falls down not just that it came down to this physical world, but it goes into Sitra Achra. So this would be just like, if you observe, just like people today, Rahman al-Islam, when you think of hostages, which is very even hard to think about it, what do you think? What is the feeling that you feel? The feeling of compassion, like you feel so much compassion with them, that brings us to tears. You think of a person who is a human being, free, is in a situation where they're tied up, where they're bound, they're restricted, they're restrained, in addition to all the Rahman al-Islam, the torture that they go through. And in a certain sense, this is what's happening to the neshama. The only difference is when you're talking about human beings, everyone sees it, and everyone is well aware. When you talk about the neshama, we don't see it naturally. We have to think about it in our mind until we understand the reality of how pitiful it is, what the neshama is going through. But here's another point on page 247. Not only do I feel this feeling of Rahmanas, compassion for the neshama, but I also have that feeling for its source, the source of the neshama, meaning the hey of Hashem's name. There's a certain aspect of Hashem's name that sort of is being forced to, being schlepped down to a place where it doesn't want to be, and it's being schlepped down to a place which is the opposite of everything that it stands for. As it says, it says that a person who commits the sin, he will return to Hashem, have compassion for him. What does compassion mean? It means if I meditate on the fact that when I do an Avera, I'm bringing down the Shekhinah in a place where it does not want to be, and I'm sort of forcing it. Again, you always have to reiterate that Chas v'shalom, no human being can force Hashem to anything. But Hashem chose to be connected to us, and that what we do will accomplish this, even though Hashem himself is infinite. No one can do any harm to him, but he chose to be affected by what we do. He connected himself to us in such a way. Now, the reason he connected to us in such a way is the opposite. So we should be able to accomplish amazing things, to empower us to do amazing things. What did we do? We took that opportunity that Hashem gave us, that he shared part of his Shekhinah with our neshama, and we do the opposite. We go to a negative place and we schlep the Shekhinah down together with us. So if I stop, and I start thinking, what am I doing? What's happening? And I realize what I've done to the Shekhinah, so to speak, that should make me feel Rahman. So it's two things: compassion for my own personal neshama, and compassion for the Shekhinah, which is the letter Hey of Hashem's name. Peter, so this passage, when it says the sinner will return to Hashem at compassion, it means to arouse compassion for this life flow that comes from Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, that he evolved and descended. I gave a mashal yesterday, but unfortunately, it's a very real thing. In the last few days, they discovered that there was somebody who was hired by Iran to assassinate the top people in Israel, and who was the someone, a Jew, an Israeli Jew, that's the height of being a traitor, to take your opportunity that you're there and you have the contacts, you have the connection, you're living in the country, to use that opportunity to do what? To do the opposite, to give and supply our worst enemy with information and supply them and provide them with the opportunity to Rahman al-Islam do what they want to do. And that's what we're doing to Klippa. Hello. And how do we do that? I mean, this comes about through our actions and through our negative thoughts. We schlep down the klipa, the kedusha into klipa. Page 248. Because as it's written, Mela Osaber a king that's bound with gutters. I guess it means certain branches that they tie us down. They tie down the king. Which means, imagine you take a king and you tie him up in chains. The king is Hashem. Specifically, it's Shem Havaya. The more specific is the letter of Hashem's name, Shem Havaya. And we're taking that letter and we're tying it up and putting it into a place where it's tortured. So when is the time that a person should be thinking about this? This is a very important point. The time that's auspicious and that's conducive to these thoughts will be tikkun chatzos, which basically is literally means midnight, and saying the special prayers at midnight. This is something which years ago was more common. People would get up in the middle of the night, after midnight, sit down on the floor, and say certain prayers where they were lamenting, crying about the Churban Beis Hamikdash, like we do on Teshuva. And even though they were crying about the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, but really it was also included crying about the destruction of my personal Beis Hamikdash, about what is going on with my personal life, the godliness in me, the Beis Hamikdash within me. So this is the time for that, even though today we don't do that. But what we do today, the time for this today, so to speak, because we'll soon see that even today we have to be careful with this kind of meditation, that it shouldn't have negative results. The time for that will be at night before going to bed. In those prayers, so first of all, we learned about, I think we touched on this in the morning class and the afternoon class. When he says the auspicious time, it also means this is not something a person should be thinking about all the time. Like you just learned this in Tanya. Okay, you close the Tanya, you have no choice. There's another class after this. Okay, then you have a break. Oh, now you start thinking about my neshama, about the Shekhinah, and what have I done? I brought it down. No, this is not the time for it. Okay, next class, also not the time for it. Okay, Mincha, not the time for it. I'm going to work, not the time for it. During the day is not the time for it. Not when I'm davening, not when I'm learning, and not when I am working. What does it mean it's not the time? It means if these thoughts come to me, and even if it brings me to the point where I really feel compassion, we should know that these feelings are coming from the Yetzer Hara, from Klipa, not from Kedusha. How can it be? It's such pure feelings. The answer is that this is the famous Hayom Yom that the Yetzer Hara sometimes puts on holy garments. He comes with a long white beard, and don't look at me, a long white beard, and he has garments of a big chassid, and he tells you, so in the name of chassidus, what you're doing now is a very good thing, but really, this is the worst enemy. It's like in warfare, the worst enemy is people that are spies. They're dressed like the other side, and they look like somebody which is one of your friends, but in essence, they are really enemies. But they talk, they act, they make the impression as if they're with you. And when the Yetzer Hara comes to us in such a way, it's more dangerous than when it comes openly and says, Shalom Aleichem, I am your local Yetzer Hara, and I'm here to pull you away from Hashem. When he says that, you say, goodbye, I don't want to talk to you. When he comes along and says, I want to make you closer to Hashem, oh, now I'm listening. And then when I listen, he gets me. So one of the ways, and one of the most effective ways the Yetzer Hara has, is when it makes us feel bad about our virus, and this thought process that he's talking about here. So how do I know to be careful? So the first sign is, when are those thoughts coming? If it comes during the day, comes during davening, if it comes during learning, if it comes during the time of the day that I'm supposed to be active and productive, it's the Yetzer Hara. So when is the time? So the time is at the end of the day, at least for us, at the end of the day, as I'm getting ready for tomorrow, I think a little bit of how my day went, how tomorrow's day could be better. And even then, we'll soon see we don't focus so much on the negative as much as how will tomorrow be better. That's the main focus. This is the meaning of the words that it says in that prayer. I'm talking about the prayers of Tikkun Chatzos. I think that we even have it in this siddur. We don't say it today, but it's still printed in this siddur. I shouldn't show you, might start saying it. Okay. This is what it says. Hashem, the crown of our head has fallen. Woe to us that we have sinned. Which means It goes together. The fact that we've sinned, that caused the crown of our head to fall. Who's the crown of our head? The Shekhinah. That we're bringing the Shekhinah down into a place of klipa. There's a source called Pirkei HaCholos, and over there it refers to Hashem when a person does an Aveira as the humiliated king. Imagine a person who humiliates the king. Ramak, who is a very famous Kabbalist, there's no greater humiliation than this, to take the Shekhinah and bring the Shekhinah down, force it into a place of klipa. Especially in order to sort of intensify this thought process, in order to really get it even more, that's when you think about the greatness of Hashem, that Hashem fills all the world and encompasses all the worlds, and every person will be extremely grieved by this thought. In other words, when you think about the fact that Hashem's presence, taking a king and bringing him to a place which is humiliating him, the greater the king is, the greater the humiliation. In other words, if it's a king that's over a nation that has 500,000 people, he's also a king, but it's a small king. If it's a king that's a king over many nations, and he's a king over 5 million people, he's a bigger king. There were certain kings that were king over the whole world. The one says Achashverosh ruled over the whole world. Shlomo Melech ruled over the whole world. Nebuchadnezzar and Babel ruled over the whole world. Imagine a king who ruled over the whole world. So he's much higher, much greater, and therefore when you schlep that down, it's even more humiliating. So the more a person understands the greatness of Hashem, the more will be the feeling of compassion. So when you think of it, this is probably a bit similar. There's a niggin, one of the nigunim that the Rabbi taught. I don't know if everyone is aware of this, that every Simchas Torah for 10 years, the Rebbe would teach a new niggin. This was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. After all the hakafos, after eating the yontiv meal, they would come downstairs again and teach a niggin. And one of those nigunim is called Shamil. And Shamil, the Rebbe told the story behind it, that this was actually a barbarian guy who lived in the mountains, whatever what it's called. It's in Kafkaz, they call it. It's Carpathian Mountains, and the king could never. He knew him and his men knew the mountains inside out. Whenever they tried to stop him from his criminal acts, they could never stop him because he knew all the hideouts. He knew how to get away. And then finally, they found a way of tricking him. They said they're making peace. Let's meet. And when they met, they violated their promise and they arrested him. That's what happened. He was in jail. And when he was in jail, he sang the song. And Chassidim, who happened to go past the jail, heard the song. And they adopted it, became a Chassidish niggin. And the Rebbe taught that niggin. And what was this? What was the song? A real song has a meaning. The song was that before he was a free bird, he was yearning for those days that he was free. He was able to go on the mountains and all the different places he wanted to be. And now he's locked up into this room. And the Chassidim interpreted the meaning, the niggin, to the neshama. That the neshama before was like a free bird, flying, doing everything at once. And then we take it and we lock it up in the guf, in the nefesh bahamis, in this physical world. That alone would be already pretty painful. On top of that, we take the neshama and we schlep it into klipa, which is even lower. So the more we think about it, the more we think about how great the Shekhinah is, or the neshama is, how low klipa is, altogether that sort of magnifies the feeling of compassion. And the purpose of that is to bring me to Teshuva. Yeah.
You're going to talk about the soul, where it comes down to this world in the body. We're just godly soul, and then when it comes in this body, then the animal sort of like joins it.
Right, yeah. So basically, the godless has two layers. It goes into a animal soul, and then the animal soul is in the physical body, and the two of them gang up with the godless soul. That's what's happening. So in a sense, this feeling of compassion will depend. It'll be each person according to their intellectual capacity. The more I understand the greatness of Hashem, the more compassion I'll have. A person who understands the greatness of Hashem on a lesser level won't have such a strong feeling of compassion. But what's sort of the common denominator for everyone is to meditate on this thing. Number one, the Rahmanas on the Neshama, and number two, the Rahmanas, so to speak, on the Hashem's Shechina that's brought down. This man explains something else to you. When you learn about the spheres or the emotional attributes, there's Chesed, Gvura, Peres, so on. Chesed is love. We all understand what that means. You serve Hashem with love. Gvura is the opposite, is fear and awe. You serve Hashem with fear and awe. The third one, which is the Tiferes, is always translated as compassion. What does it mean to serve Hashem with compassion? I think most people, when they hear that, they're thinking having compassion on a poor person, which is true, but it's very different than love and fear. Love is for Hashem, towards Hashem. Fear is for Hashem, towards Hashem. Compassion is for the poor person. How do you serve Hashem? How do you mean you connect to Hashem through compassion? So this is the answer. Just like love and fear are feeling that I have towards Hashem, compassion is also a feeling that I have towards Hashem. And the feeling of compassion is how, the Rahmanas, so to speak, the how pitiful it is that the Shechina came down so low. And what's the point of that is that's going to generate feelings of doing everything I can to bring the Shechina in a higher place. What about a person who didn't do an Aveira? They can also have this feeling of compassion. Because by them, they weren't thinking about, okay, the Shechina went into Klippa. No, they don't do Aveiras, a Beinani or a Tzaddik. But they'll also think about how the Shechina comes from this infinite place and it goes into my group. The only thing that justifies the descent is one thing. What is it? What? Torah mitzvah, because by doing Torah mitzvah, the neshama is able to rise to a higher place than it was before. And the Shechina will get more pleasure than it ever had before. So therefore, the more a person thinks about this compassion, that'll generate within the person and motivate the person to be more into Torah mitzvahs in order to take away that feeling and to justify the fact that the neshama or the Shechina came down. But when a person does an Aveira, it's more than that. It's not just I brought it down, but I brought it into a place of people. So if you notice in davening, there's not a number of places that talks about compassion, and that's one of the things that Hasidus explains it's referring to. The compassion I feel to my neshama, or the compassion I feel the Rahmanas for the Shechina that's brought down. So this is one thing. Remember, in the beginning of the chapter, he said it involves two things on page 245. How do you get to Teshuva Tata? Two things. This is one. Now comes the second. I just want to say that this also, if you notice, brings out another point. That even a person who is feeling all these feelings and therefore motivated to change, it doesn't say anything here about feeling something that, oh, I'm a failure. I didn't accomplish what I'm supposed to, and therefore I am like thoughts that sort of take away from my feeling of success, something which affects my ego. That's not what it is. It's just thinking about the Shechina and thinking about the neshama and feeling compassion. So now let's go to the second thing. Rabbi, the second inyan that's also involved is levatesh lachniach klipa v'sidracha, to find a way to crush and subdue the klipa sidracha. What's bringing me down? The klipa. So I have to find a way to crush the klipa and weaken it, that it shouldn't be able to have that effect that it's having on me. How do I do that? And what does it mean to crush it? Page 250. The klipa, all that it is in essence, is arrogance. That's what klipa is all about. The klipa is something which is created by Hashem. Hashem is the one that created it and gives it chayas. But the klipa, what does it mean, klipa? We know according to Chassidus, klipa means forces that feel independent of Hashem on some level. In Gemara it says, in fact, we're going to be learning a mimer after Yantiv, talks more about this in detail. But in the Gemara it says that those that worship the idols, the sun, the moon, the constellations, or other forces, or certain angels that they're worshiping, they refer to them as Elokad Elokaya. They're the God of Hashem is the God of all the gods, which means Hashem is God. He created the world. He's in charge. He's the super in charge. But then other ones are also gods. What does it mean they're also gods? It means they have some sense of independent power to do things on their own. And that independence, that's what constitutes our Torah. Because often when people start learning Torah and they learn about different angels, there's an angel for water, an angel for fire, and there's an angel that does this, an angel does that, it starts raising questions. What do you mean angels? Hashem does everything. Like I said the other day about the Bezdin Shlomailo, the heavenly courts. Even though it says the angels do, it's really all Hashem. The angels are only tools through which Hashem does things, but the angels don't have any independent power to do anything. And that's why if a person prays to an angel, that might be avodah zarah. Why? That means I'm saying the angels have the independent power to do something. Humans have independent bechira. We have bechira. And that's what the Rambam writes, that humans are the most unique creation. Animals don't have any free choice. They work operated by instinct. Angels, in a lower way than humans. Angels are much higher than humans, but they also operate by instinct. It's a spiritual instinct. Hashem creates them, programs them to have certain feelings, and these are the feelings these angels have for the last thousands of years. They don't have any choice to make any changes, to improve, to change, to be different. They were just programmed to serve Hashem. And they don't have an independent power to do anything outside of Hashem. So really, if it comes down to the core of what is Klipa, it's a force that does feel in some way independent of Hashem, which is Yeshus. That's what he's talking about. That's the gaiva, the arrogance. The arrogance means that feeling of separateness. I am something. When Shekasa, like it says in Talmudiya, Kanesha, there's a pasuk, the pasuk in Tanakh, and it says, if you will rise like an eagle, Hashem says, I will bring you down. Why does he compare doing an aver like rising like an eagle? In other words, that's what defines klipa. The rising like an eagle is another way of describing arrogance. A person who is arrogant feels superior to everyone else. That's where it comes from. So if that's their real essence and that's their source, so therefore, if I'm able to crush that arrogance, then I've crushed them completely. I destroyed them. That destroyed them. So how do I do that? When we crush the klipa, that is, in different words, that's the death and the nullification of klipa. But how do we crush the klipa? When a person's heart is broken from whatever he did wrong, when his heart is broken, this breaks the klipa. Shkos of the Zohar HaKadosh al Pasuk Zivchei Elokim Ruach Nishbara Leiv Nishbar V'Nivke Elokim Le'Sidre. There's a pasuk in the Tehillim. We actually say this pasuk every night before going to bed. It's chapter 51 in Tehillim, and it says Zivchei Elokim. What is an offering to Elokim, to Hashem? Ruach Nishbara, a broken spirit. Leiv Nishbar, a broken heart, and a crushed heart. What does that mean? Carbon. When you actually bring a physical carbon from a behemoth, you bring an animal as a carbon. That goes with Shem Havaya. The Chumash, whenever it talks about karbanos, it says this gives pleasure to Hashem, but uses the name Havaya. Yimidus Harachim. But Hashem Elokim, but when we talk about the name Elokim, name Elokim is Midus Adin. That's the source of judgment. Ein Makriv and carbon behemoth. That's not the animal which we bring for carbon. Only helps when it comes to Shem Havaya, but not the Shem Elokim. So how do we correct things that are related to the name of Elokim? So that is the Shaber Ulahaver Ruch Hatuma Vasidracha. It's by breaking and crushing the spirit of impurity of the Sitracha, which is the Klippa. That's how I bring a carbon to Shem Elokim. So how do you break? How do you crush the spirit of Sidracha? I can really talk about it later, but I want to insert it now before you go away with a wrong interpretation. Again, don't get stuck on this. We are. I read it. I know I said this 10 times. This is number 11. That we are in a different generation. And this is very similar to medicine. Sometimes there's medicine for a certain illness. And the medicine really works. But the problem with the medicine is it destroys all the healthy tissue in the body also. So, in fact, they say there's certain conditions that the medicine for the condition does more damage than the condition itself. One of the most amazing things that in recent years that they've sort of invented was something similar to what you find in warfare, and I think it's based on the same principles. And that is that now they have these weapons that are precision weapons, which means it's a smart bomb, that it's aimed at a specific target, and it doesn't do any damage anyplace else, only that target. So they have a certain way of healing certain diseases the same way, but it's medication. That it only goes to the cells that are not okay, destroys those cells, but doesn't destroy the healthy cells. So, for example, when it comes to taking antibiotic, most of the time you take 3 teaspoons a day, 2 teaspoons a day. When it comes to drinking orange juice, you take a few cups a day. What's the difference? Because if Chas v'Shalom would drink a few cups of antibiotic a day, it would do a lot of damage because this is something which breaks. When you use something that breaks, you have to make sure it only breaks what needs to be broken, not everything else. We're in that category today, that we have to be extremely, extremely cautious with anything that breaks, because we find that when people get too heavily into this kind of thought process, it does more damage than it does good. So this has to be extremely minimal. Still, we'll have to talk about how does it apply. But nevertheless, how do you break and crush the spirit of the klipa? Ma'at mizer, first of all, one method is siguf and betanius. Again, something which was done years ago and we don't do it today. Through mortification, self-mortification, and fasts. In other words, when a person does things that deprives themselves of eating properly, deprives themselves of sleeping properly, deprives themselves of other pleasures, or other even certain needs which are more basic needs. But by depriving myself, it's crushing me. And what is it crushing? It's crushing my klipa. But in our generation, so the Alter Rebbe is already saying in his times, 250 years ago, that we don't have the strength to fast like David HaMelech. Why is he mentioning David HaMelech? The Gemara says, the Maimer Rabbi saying in the Chayrin of the Pasuk, "V'libi kolo b'kibi." There's a pasuk where David says, "My heart is slain in me. What does it mean his heart is slain? If a person's heart is slain, then he's not alive. It means hardly the tightness. He killed his Yetzer Hara through fasting. It doesn't mean that he didn't feed the Yetzer Hara, so he died because he didn't eat a lot. It means the fasting was a form of tshuva, and not only did he control his Yetzer Hara, he destroyed it completely. That's how the Rebbe explained in Tanya, one is the tzaddik gomer, complete tzaddik, that he has no Yetzer Hara anymore. He has no klipa in him. So that approach doesn't work so much for those days. Was the other approach is crushing emotionally. And I'm adding that based on the Rebbe's Sikha, that approach also doesn't apply to us today. So what does? Okay, slowly we'll get there. There's a story told about a person that the nobleman in his area where he lived, he was a tailor, and he was an exceptional tailor. And the nobleman where he lived was traveling somewhere, and he picked up a piece of material that was absolutely stunning. Never saw anything like it in the world. And there was only a little bit left, and he bought all the material that was left. He came home, and he offered that any tailor that would make a beautiful robe for him from this material, he's going to pay them a lot of money because he was just in love with that material. But he can't get any more material. This is it. This is anything else left. So if you don't do a good job and you ruin it, then you have to pay with your head. This was the norm in those days. So of course, any normal tailor didn't even dare take up the challenge, because if I do a good job, I'll make a lot of money. But if I don't, he's, God forbid, gonna kill him. So why even try? But this tailor that we're talking about, he had a lot of self-confidence, very arrogant. He knew that he could do the job. There's no way in the world he won't be happy with his work. And he took it on. And not only took it on, he was already dreaming about what he's going to do with all the money and what he's going to, where he's going to build and buy. And finally the day comes. He put together this beautiful, magnificent garment, brings it into the nobleman. The nobleman looks at it and goes, you ruined my material. What did you do? This is so ugly. This is so ugly. I can't even look at it. He calls in his wife, the Rebbetzin nobleman. She goes to have a look at it. And she goes, I can't believe what he did. He starts crying. He ruined the material. And he said, this was the deal. You ruined it. He said, give me, maybe I can do something. Maybe I can fix it up. Give me X amount of time. He came home. He told his wife, there's nothing he can do. He put everything into it. There's nothing he can do. And his wife begged him, there's a certain tzaddik, I think they said was a provisioner, certain tzaddik who's not far from it, go to him and ask him what to do. There's nothing to do, tzaddik, nobody can help you. He didn't believe in tzaddikim. Anyway, she begged and she pleaded. Anyway, there's nothing you can do. He said, go, you have nothing to lose. Came to the tzaddik, and the tzaddik said, take all the stitches out, all the stitches, and put it back exactly the way you did it before. He walked out thinking, what a waste of time. If I put it back the way it was before, I'll have the same results as before. And again, his wife pounding, you do what the Rebbe told you. He's a tzaddik, he told you to do it. You have nothing to lose. There's nothing else you can do, right? You don't know what to do. Listen, and she got him to do it. He took apart all the stitches, put everything back together again. He is already thinking about the end of his life, said goodbye to everybody. He goes to the parrots, he brings it in, rolls it up, he looks at it. Wow, this is a beautiful piece of work. Goes to his wife, and they're both wowing and wooing and hooing, and they give him a lot of money. He comes home, he's like dizzy. He's like, I'm going back to the Rebbe. He has to explain what just happened. The Rebbe said like this, that the first time that you did it, you were full of so much arrogance. He brought a pasuk where it says, arrogance is something which is repulsive by Hashem. It made the garment repulsive. The second time you did it, you were so humbled by the fact, number one, that you failed. Number two, that here is going to end your life. That humbled you. And because you were humbled, the beauty of the garment was able to shine out there. So Alter Rebbe is basically saying, when a person, chas v'shalom, is suffering physically, or a person realizes how they've done something so negative, it humbles them. And when it humbles me, it's really humbling my nefesh habahamis, my klipa. And when the klipa is humbled, it's off, it's destroyed, and then I can get closer to Hashem. But it's not what we focus on. Saying it again. It reminds me of there was someone had this book on about dieting, and then one page the person writes, he gives you all the right foods to eat, but he writes on top, but don't overeat. Now the whole page from the top to the bottom, we counted, it was 91 times. Do not overeat, do not overeat, do not overeat, do not overeat, do not overeat. Do not try to crush anybody, not other people and not yourself. And we'll talk about this later, how it applies. Okay.
Thank you.
There's one in Heaven Friendly, this water bottle is like, we can keep them for like 4 days.
That's probably your real style.
I think the first day I saw, I want to take a picture, and be like, oh no, you left it.
I do have a big one also.
But
But it's in my closet. I know it's not the one.
Yeah.